say this is a very special and a very emotional moment for me because I never before have been to Ukraine, and to be the first time here and to have the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience, it takes a little bit my breath away. So, dear Oleksiy, dear Madam President, Excellencies, Member of Parliament, members of government, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Ukraine. I would like to thank you as head of Konrad Adenauer Foundation for the invitation that we as German Foundation can be part of this Plexi Security meeting and Plexi Security discussions. And I want to thank the chairman of BSF, the city of Odessa, and a special thank you to the opera and the ensembles. For the third time we gather in Odessa, and for the second time in this remarkable opera house. This place has also become a symbol of Odessa's and Ukraine's resolve to defend itself against the Russian invaders. We still remember the videos of the opera singers and orchestra who gathered in front of the opera house shortly after the start of the large-scale war of aggression and sang the Ukrainian national anthem while sandbags were being filled just a few meters away. In doing so, they were among the first to recognize that this war is not merely about the defense of a state that is a free, sovereign Ukraine, but far more about the defense of the Ukrainian cultural nation. We can see how Ukrainian cultural and cultural autonomy are a source of strength. You know not only who you are fighting against, but, and this is far more important, but also what you are fighting for: your identity, your culture, your independence, your right for free elections, and the rule of law. Nevertheless, I do not want to gloss over the sacrifices you are making for this cause. And among so many others, there are members of the ensembles of this opera who were also killed. And it's easy for us to admire the resilience of the Ukrainian people, but none of them shows this. Not a single soldier, not a single parent who has lost their child, not a single child who has been orphaned, not a single widow or widower, not a single person whose life has been shattered. We must not forget that they have been forced to display this resilience for 4 years now. This is, let me be frankly, this is also because we in Europe and in the US have often failed to act quickly and decisively enough. Because to this day, we have not built up the kind of political and economic pressure on Putin that would force him to genuine negotiation. On the other hand, since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion, Europe has provided 200 billion euros in military, financial, and humanitarian aid, with a further 200 billion still outstanding, and the US had provided to 115 billion euros as well. Combined with the Ukrainian speed, the adaptability and ingenuity, this has resulted in a formidable military force capable of striking deep into Russian territory. Military force which has neutralized the Russian Black Sea Fleet, military force that developed defense lines using robotics and AI. What Ukraine doesn't need is well-meaning advice. No one in Europe has more combat experience or is quicker or more pragmatic when it comes to developing and refining new systems. What Ukraine needs is reliable financial support, a steady supply of supplies, partnerships in production, and a weapons that is not yet able to produce itself. When Ukrainian President Zelensky some days ago has issued a direct appeal to President Trump and the US Congress, warning that Ukraine urgently needs additional Patriot missile systems in a large-scale direct military aid package, because delivering under the PURL are not keeping pace with battlefield needs, there should be a positive response like the one from senior Republican lawmaker Joe Wilson. And when pro-Russian political forces all over in Europe criticize aid to Ukraine paid by taxpayers, we should finally make use of the 300 billion in frozen Russian assets held in Europe. There are legal ways to do this, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, I visited, or 2 days ago, I visited our office in Moldova. In a meeting, the leader of the ruling political party there, PAS, said the first and most important ingredient is political will. The first ingredient is political will. I think nowhere it is as clear as here in Odessa, the gateway to the Black Sea region, how closely the security of Ukraine, Europe, and the free world are intertwined. Here, Ukraine and Europe are countries bordering the Black Sea, come face to face with the power which works together with many of the world's authoritarian states. We see here at the shore of the Black Sea in particular that Ukraine's security, Europe's security, and the security in the world rely on each other. Just as with Ukraine's national symbol, the trident, these three securities are an inseparable part of the same whole. Ukraine needs the support of other democratic European nations to be secure. Vice versa, these democratic European nations need the support of Ukraine to be secure. A united Europe with Ukraine is an integral part of is as a pillar of security for the free nations of the world against their authoritarian adversaries. These three securities build upon one another and are interdependent. You cannot have only one of them. And to make it very concrete, in 2025, Ukraine produced more than 4 million drones. And for this year, the target is reportedly more than 7 million, with around 450 companies are now active in Ukraine's drone sector. Nowhere is this clear what it means then in the Black Sea region. Ukrainian innovation has helped push back Russia's fleet and reopen maritime routes. According to Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, Ukrainian maritime unmanned platforms have destroyed critically damaged more than 25 Russian military vessels. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense stated in April this year that around 30% of Russia's Black Sea Fleet combat assets has been destroyed or seriously damaged. This has direct global consequences. The Black Sea Crane Initiative enabled almost 33 million tons of grain and foodstuffs to be exported by July 2023, while the ports of Greater Odessa handled 73 million tons of export cargo in 2025, including 38 million tons of grain. We need a new common European security order, including Ukraine. Without Europe, Ukraine is perhaps strong enough, but it's better with the Ukraine to defend itself, with the Europeans to defend itself against Russia. But without Ukraine, Europe is not strong enough against Russia either. Ukraine must therefore be a part of the European security order. This will all become more important the more the US withdraw from European security architecture. And as chairwoman of the Adenauer Foundation, I say that within a common European security order, we also need a common European policy of strength, just as the first Chancellor of West Germany, Konrad Adenauer, once pursued towards the Soviet Union. A European policy that credibly deters Russia from attacks further states in Europe and forces it to the negotiation table to discuss a just peace with Ukraine. For Russia sees enemies in all of us here. Russia is already waging a covert war against the West, hybrid warfare, arson attacks, murders of regime opponents, espionage, sabotage, infiltration of party systems and democratic institutions, and much more. We must face up this challenge, particularly in the European Union, whether we like it or not. As Europeans, we must all understand and act on the fact that this war is not merely a regional conflict. Unfortunately, still some people in Europe do think so. But no, it is a decisive battle over what spirit should prevail amongst the European nations and also the nations in the world for our generation and the generation of our children. This war will determine the future of Ukraine as a free nation, and it will also determine the future of Europe as a continent united in peace, freedom, and security. Already as a German Minister of Defense, our ministry argued that Europe has to take greater responsibility for its own security. German and European security policy have to become far more effective, better coordinated, and more visible. Today, Ukraine shows why this war was never an abstract debate. European security is decided by courage, capability, responsibility, and political will, and it's being decided here in Ukraine. The Russian regime fought and still thinks in terms of logic whereby a larger country is automatically superior to a smaller one. This way of Russian thinking is the exact opposite of the idea underlying the idea of European integration. The fundamental principle of European integration, by contrast, is that the larger one respect the smaller nations, and that both large and small nations stand together against their adversaries. This is the deeper reason why Europe stands together with Ukraine, because as Ukrainians, Germans, and Europeans, we are defending ourselves against the power that violates this very founding principle of European integration. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this year's BSFF will see discussions on these topics and ideas which feature in almost all the panels. What they all have in common is the choice we face. Either we defend the European security order together, or we risk losing it piece by piece. Ukraine has already made its decision, and stands as an example of admirable courage and bravery. Now, it's up to us Europeans to make a choice as well. We are now in a defining moment for Europe and for the free world as well. A nation like Ukraine that defends its very identity and culture and thinks like you do is a nation that will not be silenced. A Europe that stands with Ukraine is a Europe that remains true to itself. And a strong and united Europe, together with the US, is the best contribution for peace and security in Odessa, the Black Sea region, Europe, and the world. We as Konrad Adenauer Foundation, we are happy to be part of this effort. Europe is in our DNA. We have been active in Ukraine for more than 30 years, and we are the only one among the German political foundations that has expert staff permanently based in Ukraine, which clearly shows our commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a very interesting conference here. I wish you all the best for Odessa, all the best for Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you so much. Yeah, please take your seat. Take this moment. Once again, your applause. Thank you so much. And now to continue this conversation on stage, please welcome Dr. Hanna Shelest, Security Studies Program Director at the Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian PRISM, for a keynote conversation with Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, our moderator. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for this introduction. It is my great pleasure to continue the conversation about the security in Europe and transatlantic. And considering that we don't have too much time, even that Alexei kindly said that we are easygoing here, but we are still with the German co-organizers, so we try to be on time as much as possible. But there are still several questions that we wanted to discuss, and let me first return back to your past. 5 years ago, you are still Minister of Defense of Germany. If you would know what happened in Ukraine in 6 months, and if you know what would be in 5 years, year 2026, what would you do differently as the Minister of Defense, as the German politician?
So as you know, it's always not so easy with the informations and the knowledge we have now to say, I told you so, and I would do this in the past, like in this direction or another one. But as I said, we tried in our ministry in these 2 years, in 90 to 21, to make very, very clear that for us, Russia is a threat. A very real threat, that we have to ramp up our military muscles in Germany and especially in contributing far more to the muscles of and the contributions to NATO. But at this time there were no really public awareness for this and political awareness. And with the knowledge from today, I would have pushed far harder, to try harder, because I have to say it feels until today for me like one of my biggest political failure I are responsible for, that we have not been able to make discourse in the public in a better sense than we did.
After 4 years of war, do you believe that German society now much better understand that this threat is not just for Ukraine, that it is something far, but Germany should care about its own security, European security, and Ukrainian security as part of the European security?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense of that there is, and this is the difference to the time before, there is no question about the financial or the finances that are needed because we have said with the Zeitenwende, whatever it costs. So money is not an issue. But what we see, and together with the discussions and the difference we see now in the geopolitical strategy coming from Washington, not just from the Trump administration several years ago, and the shift more to the Indo-Pacific, we see that the both flags of NATO, and one very strong coming from the US side and the other quite weaker coming from the European side, we have to muscle up this leg to have a real burden sharing and to have a very good agreement between partners within the NATO. And I think in a logical sense, this is what politicians and this is what public opinion in Germany understands. But what we have to work for quite harder than we did in the past is a shift in our mindset. As I said, the first ingredient is the political will, and the awareness that each one of us is now being targeted from a Russian hybrid war, and that we need a very strong and a very strong stamina, a very strong resilient civilian resilience as well. And then on a third point, we have to find far better ways to be quicker, to be more practical when it comes to armament processes and so on. So we did a lot of work, but we have a lot to do.
As you already named the elephant in the room, the United States, and for the last months, everything what we can read in the news is about the desire of the United States to withdraw some part of the forces from Europe and first of all from Germany. And we understand that since the end of the Cold War, the security of Germany and of the eastern flank been guaranteed significantly by the presence of the US forces. That was the part of the security architecture in Europe where we are now. Even that there are discussions, just 5,000, maybe that is not enough of people to change the security architecture. But we understand that they are also taking off capabilities. So it's not just about people, it's about what they can do. Do you feel that Europe is ready to take this responsibility from the United States? What about Germany? Are you prepared after 70 years of significant presence of the US forces, if this architecture changes?
So, all emotions by side, I think we need a very no-nonsense approach to this discussion. And there have been in the past as well plans coming from Washington to withdraw a certain number of troops from Germany and to discuss about capabilities. So I think this is not quite brand new now. What we have to see is that there is another security strategy in the US, as I said, starting with President Obama and now with the Trump administration. There are far more interest now in the Indo-Pacific as well as in Europe, and this is the reason because of which we have to say we have to becoming much stronger as Europeans in capability building, in cooperation, and in armed forces. So this is the task at hand from the past. Now is much more urgent, and I think that. We shouldn't discuss this under a certain sound of anti-Americanism. It's about NATO, it's about to make clear that both sides, the US side and the Europeans, have common interest. And the US side has interest here in Europe as well, because Russia, whatever Trump is saying, Russia is a threat to them as well. and they need the infrastructure and the facilities here as well. There haven't been the possibility to attack Iran without facilities in Ramstein in Germany or other things. So this is part of a political discussion between Europeans and the US side. Where are our common interests? What can we do to have a real burden sharing and to create a good partnership? That means we have to be not so emotional, but we have to be much more stronger in doing our homework.
Let me be provocative, because that's the question that I get outside of Europe at each of the meetings that we had. Will NATO survive this crisis? This transatlantic relations crisis that we're experiencing the last year?
Yeah, NATO will survive. I'm quite sure about this. Perhaps it will have another system of burden sharing in slightly other form, but it will survive because we see that there are so many countries around us aiming for becoming member of NATO, as well as for becoming member of the European community. That shows that these are assets for us that are quite important, and therefore we should do all we can to defend these organizations like NATO.
As we are in Ukraine, we cannot skip questions about the German-Ukrainian relations for sure. And I would say that we passed a tremendous evolution of these relations. From hesitations 4 years ago in terms of support, for the years of concentration on the humanitarian and economic support, to be now one of the leaders of the defense support, joint production of the military equipment, to the coalition of willing, being one of the leaders of the coalition of willing. Except of the domestic acknowledging of the threat, what else drives the German politics about Ukraine? Why Ukraine should be important for Germany?
As I said in my keynote speech, it's about shared values. It's about a shared future here in Europe. To go to the streets of Odessa, you feel it from the bottom of your heart. This is part of Europe, and the fight here of so many Ukrainians is a fight for European values, is a fight for our freedom, for our security, and we know and have always known that our security in Germany depends on our neighbors, depends on our own forces, but depends on our neighbors, on our commitment with others. And this kind of sovereignty made it possible in the past that we are now a united nation. And I think this is for us a power and a force to go forward and to cooperate as closely with Ukraine as it is possible.
Values is good, but the modern politics are very pragmatic, especially when you go to your voters. Let's be honest, 50% of them will not buy the arguments about values or shared history, something like this. They need something for the future and understanding, okay, what they can give to us. We understand what we can give to Ukraine, but what Ukraine can give to us. Do you see that Ukraine can be a valued member of the European Union and the valued economic partner to Germany when we speak about the future trade, not just the agriculture, for example, or something from the classical old trade relations that we used to have?
So first of all, to live in a space where you can live on your values lies in your own interest, So therefore, I would say there is not a difference between interest and values. It comes together and belongs together. And we see right now, for example, on the military side, the the creativity come from Ukraine. And they teaching us so many useful lessons. We learned so much from them. For example, at the German Bundeswehr, This is not an one-way. It's a win-win situation. And sure, and you know it better here in Ukraine than I do, there is a lot of work to do in the future, of reforms, of economic development. But I think in this, especially given the new technological developments, there are great chances for Ukraine, and they can contribute so much to a very good development in Europe as a whole. And sure, there will be discussions about different interests when it comes I forgot the word, Landwirtschaft, sorry, farming, so sorry. Because we know there are other European community members with similar interests, but this is part of the enlargement process. And so we, as the other European countries, we have to do our homework, but Ukraine has to do its own work as well.
Let's return back to Germany, because you talked about the transformation of the Germany from inside, the transformation of the role of Germany in Europe, and also about the global challenges. And you've been absolutely right that events in Iran, even if we would like to separate them, but considering the dependence between Iran and Russia, or the US and the Gulf states. And now all of us, from the oil prices, because of the Hormuz closing, all of these are too much interdependent, in the Pacific as well. So if we look to the Germany wider than Europe, is Germany ready for the global role? Is Germany ready to become a global player when we speak about security and not only about trade? Or it can be just very well satisfied to be the leader of security in Europe?
I would say we are living up to these challenges you mentioned. Because as a very export-related country, as a very strong economic power, we see that we have to do, given the new technological developments and so on, we have to do our own homework. And then there are geopolitical shifts, and we are living in a common system, in a global biotope. And we see it right now on conflicts at Iran, also on the fallouts of these conflicts have an impact on all of us. So we have to adapt on this situation. And this is an hard work for the German politics, because it's quite, perhaps coming from our history, it's quite traditional that we are very concentrated on domestic issues, on European issues, but not so in an international level. But we have to find, together with the other European countries, we have to find a way to deal with China, who is a partner on the one side and a systemic challenge on the other side. We have to fight for international principles like freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, as well as in the Black Sea, and so on. And so this is at the moment in part of the main political debate we have ongoing in Germany. And it's not so easy, because there are always populist and political populist forces who try to tell people it's enough to have your own national interest. You don't need to be part of this international community. And this is quite the wrong way for Europe as a whole, and for Germany especially. And this is what we are on a political level are fighting against or are fighting for.
And my last question, as we started from you reflecting yourself 5 years ago, let's look to the future. What would you of 2026 will tell yourself in 2031?
I would tell myself, I hope we don't have made the same mistake as in 2020, 2021 or 2022, where we didn't have the power to react very quickly, very decisively to face the Russian threat and to support Ukraine. And that we now see when there is a window of opportunity, and that we are able in these years to put a very big political, military, political and economic power on Russia and on Putin, to get them on to negotiations and to get a real and a just peace deal for Ukraine.
Thank you very much. At this optimistic, I think that we answered the last question here, end game, and definitely from what we heard from this conversation, that it is definitely not the end game, but just the beginning of this conference, the 2 days of the discussions that I hope we set a tone during the first session, but also the beginning of the stronger European security for the quicker Ukrainian integration in the European Union and NATO, and definitely the sooner rather than later victory of Ukraine in this war. So we can speak next time, and maybe in 5 years, more about the trade, economic possibilities, the new Eurovision in Ukraine or in Berlin, but not about the necessity.
Not in Berlin, we are not able to win this competition. Ukrainians did.
Okay, I hope we would not need to move from Ukraine to Berlin, but definitely, why not to dream if we're dreaming what is in the next 5 years for sure. So thank you very much. Thank you for this introduction session. And we are returning the symbol of power, the microphone, to our moderator.